I'm gonna put a monster valve in this KMC Machete, and it's the beadlock version. And I just wanted to show you this beadlock. It is the beefiest beadlock ring that I've ever seen. It's 5/8 thick. What's nice about it too is it's really machined out, so it holds the wheel from spinning, and it's got all these holes machined into it with a CNC so that water can escape, and it just looks cool. Anyway, I've got on this machete 2 holes for stems, stock Schrader stems, 1 on each side, 180 degrees, and so my monster valve is going to go 90 degrees from that, and it'll be right here. I'm going to show you the tools that I'm using. So I've got a hammer, a punch, pencil, so I can mark my location. This is the important 1/4-inch NPT tap. It's a pipe thread, so which means it's a tapered thread. And then I've got 4 bits here, drill bits. I'm working my way up step by step up to the final 7/16. I have a 3/16 here, and I go to a 5/16, and then a 3/8, and then a 7/16. All right, now I have my monster valves here. These are the MV1s with the threads that go right into a tapped hole, so you don't have to take the tire off the rim. I've got the luxury of putting it on the bench, so it makes it a little easier. And then I've got the monster chuck, which is used to air up these monster valves. You need this big giant chuck to do that. Got the electric drill for drilling the holes. I've got oil for cutting the threads with the tap, and then I also have my thread sealant, which is what I prefer, blue Loctite, which is Loctite 242. I don't recommend using Teflon tape. I always recommend using some kind of a paste or liquid thread sealant, because it just seems to work a lot better. Then I have 2 sockets. I have a 1/2-inch socket and a 9/16 on a couple of different ratchets. I got a long ratchet here, which is great to use to cut the threads because you need some leverage. On that note, when I talk about cutting threads with a socket or ratchet, I use this 1/2-inch, and even though this tap has a square end, the 1/2-inch grabs it, and so that's how I use this 1/2-inch to turn the tap. So a lot of people say that they are afraid of drilling holes into their wheels, and I'm going to show you how easy it is. Nothing to be worried about as long as you're careful and as long as you use some common sense. So all I want to do is I want to center in the center of this, and I want to put my monster valve inboard as far as I can so that it keeps it out of harm's way. The reason I have my monster chuck here is I want to put my monster valve in the chuck, and then when I place it onto the wheel, I know that I have good clearance around my monster chuck. So when I'm inflating with it, I've got good access to the monster valve with my monster chuck. Now this one's an easy wheel because I've got all this room and I've got a nice flat surface here. A lot of wheels, it's a lot more complicated, like Walker Evans, for example. That wheel, a lot of times I have to put the monster valve up on this landing inside of a spoke opening, and there I have to really be sure that I've got good clearance for the monster chuck. So anyway, this one's an easy one. I'm going to stick it right here. I'll just pick an easy distance. I'll pick 2 inches from the inside. I'm just that ledge I'm catching. I'm going to just go 2 inches and be consistent there on the next 4 wheels. And then I'll look at my center point. Okay, so there's that cross. That's my center point for the drill. And now all it is drilling the hole. Usually on aluminum wheels, I like to use wax on the bit. That's the best lube for aluminum, but I couldn't find my wax, so I'm going to use oil. So while I'm drilling, I'm doing 2 things to align the bit. I want to be perpendicular to the surface this way, all right, and I also want to be centered to the cap this way. So those 2 things are what I'm looking at, and to help steady the drill and keep it going in the same direction, I use my hand, and I kind of, right now in this wheel, I can use it as kind of a spacer between the drill and the hub. So moving up to the 3/8 bit. And then finally the 7/16. Now on the 7/16, which is my final hole size, I'm going to be extra careful making sure that the bit goes in straight and perpendicular to the surface. So I'm lining it up with the hub, center of the wheel. It's grabbing a lot. I'm going to put it on the lower gear, lower speed. Go a little careful. And that's it. So the hole is drilled. Take a look at that. Now I'm going to get my 1/2 inch and again just oil up the tap really well. Same as when I was drilling the hole, I'm going to be as careful as I can to start it square or straight to the center and perpendicular to the surface of the rim. I like using this little short ratchet because it gives me room to get it started, to get the tap started. And in the beginning, if you're using a really good tap like this is, we highly recommend that you use a good quality tap. It's going to make it that much easier. So right now it's cutting really well. And this is a new tap for me, which means I haven't marked the proper depth of the threads yet. So I'm going to show you how to do that later as soon as I get the depth figured out. All right, so I'm going to switch over to the longer ratchet. All right, so when it starts to get a little tighter, I want to make sure that I back the tap out a little bit to clean out the threads. So, you just feel it get a little tight, and then you just back it out and clean out that material. And I'm going to go down about halfway. So I've gone down, about halfway on the threads. Now I'm going to test the depth. And what I'm looking for is I want to see 1.5 threads showing above the tapped hole. And what that tells me is that I'm going to have enough thread to continue to tighten it down. And right now, I don't know if you can see that, but I've got 2.5, 3 threads left. So I'm almost there. Each thread, you can imagine, each thread is 1 full turn. So I want to go down just 1 more full turn so I can see, so I can watch this thing. Because I'm going to put a little piece of tape here. Then I can see easily see one rotation. All right. So I'll get my tap back down in there. Let me get it tightened. Okay, there's my tape. And I want to go 1 more rotation, which would give me 1 more thread further down. Okay, and that is it right there. So if I calculated right, when I put the monster valve back in, it should show just the right amount of thread. Okay, I'm showing 1.5 thread. That's perfect. I've got enough thread to tighten it down once I get the sealant on it. I've got it down, fully engaged into the threads. Now, this wheel is going to go out to get powder coated, so I don't want to glue this monster valve in yet. And I'll put a plug in there, like maybe a brass plug, so that the powder coat doesn't get into the threads. If I was done and I was ready to install this monster valve, I would take the cap off, I would take the collar off, just like you see it here, get a 9/16 deep socket. After I put my glue on, I just give it, 1 finger torque, and that's all it needs. You don't want to over tighten it, and it should seal if you've got a good seal and you've got a really nice clean thread cut. So anyway, there it is. I'll put one of these in so you can see what it's going to look like when it's all done. And I've got my 2 shredders here. I've got my monster there. Very easy access to the monster chuck. Looks really good. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that I was going to show you how I mark the tap at the proper depth. And the reason I do that is once I've spent the time to figure out the exact depth on this new tap, then I can mark the tap and save a lot of time by just tapping straight down to that depth. Here's how I do it. I just take the tap, put it down to where I've gone all the way down to the right depth in the threads, and then I just get some tape and tape it right at that level. I mean, right down to the rim. So I know exactly when to stop cutting threads. There it is. Now, when I do the rest of the 4 rims of the 5, I'll save some time. And I'll just tap right down to that and I'll know when to stop. It looks like it's going to work really well, and thanks for watching.